Hello, my name is Jennifer Campbell and I'm a teaching professor in the University of Denver writing program. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the rhetorical appeals. So we get this idea of rhetorical appeals from Aristotle, who is one of the most famous of our philosophers and thinkers, and we still base a lot of our ideas about rhetorical theory on his work. He basically defined rhetoric as the art of finding the available means of persuasion in a given case. Of course, it's a bit more complicated than that, but over the years, rhetors, writers, and teachers have found it useful to follow Aristotle's general conception of the rhetorical situation and rhetorical appeals. The rhetorical situation for any communication is defined by an author communicating to a specific audience about a particular topic in order to achieve certain ends. You can watch my Defining the Rhetorical Situation video for more information and examples. Just as we often represent these elements as the rhetorical triangle, we can use a parallel triangle to represent the types of rhetorical appeals that relate to each aspect. I'll list some strategies for each type of appeal in a moment, and you can watch my ethos, logos, and pathos videos for more specifics and examples, but we'll start with the big picture. Strategies that establish the author's credibility or character build ethos. It makes an ethical appeal. This can be a bit confusing because when we hear ethics, we tend to think of philosophical judgments and moral actions. But in rhetorical terminology, just remember that ethos and ethical appeals are associated with the author. The intellectual substance of an argument is its logos, logical appeals that are based in reality. Pathos appeals relate to the audience. This is where we appeal to their emotions and values. Sometimes we call these pathetic appeals, but given that connotation and that we want you to use awesome appeals, it's more common to hear these called emotional appeals. But back to ethos. Every author or speaker comes into a rhetorical situation with a unique background and often an existing reputation. And then the author can use specific strategies to enhance their ethos within the text. Ethos is what says, this is who I am and why you should listen to me. Obviously, how you do this depends on the rhetorical situation and the authorial persona you adopt. A politician's content and word choice may vary depending on if they want to be seen as an elite policy expert or just an ordinary citizen like you. Sometimes authors will make direct references to their own expertise and credentials or to their relevant demographic or personal experiences as a way to show expertise and to connect with the audience. One might point to shared views or previous actions in order to show their character and trustworthiness. Also, it's important that we use appropriate style, tone, and diction. Are we being respectful? Are we using words that our audience will find accessible and relatable? And then we can also borrow ethos by bringing in testimony from experts and scholars or aligning ourselves with respected people and organizations. Within academic writing, it's especially important to use credible sources, to integrate them effectively, and to cite them appropriately for the rhetorical situation. All of these things are going to help you establish your own ethos as a writer. Bringing in credible sources and thoughtful examples, it also brings us into logos. So this is built through appeals to the intellect. It's easy to default into thinking about logos just as the facts and statistics, but there are a lot of ways to make logical appeals. Aristotle and others have elaborated on logical proofs, what are called syllogisms and enthymemes, but you don't need classical terms to understand causal arguments and if-then statements. A good analogy is going to be effective whether you understand exactly how it was designed. Of course, you want to be careful about logical fallacies. Sometimes within formal logic, something can be valid without being true. And it's also possible that logical fallacies like ad hominem attacks and moral equivalence have certainly proven effective. But beyond formal logic, we can use things like precedent and existing rules. Often we'll present research results or theories from published scholars. This is also where we can bring in details from objective reporting. And especially, we want to make sure that we're using credible news sources anytime we're writing about current events. This is also usually a good place to bring in definition of terms. Sometimes we might use other sources, but the real idea here is to give your own definitions and assumptions so that you and your audience are using shared vocabulary. I do not recommend that you start with, according to Merriam-Webster's, unless perhaps you are writing an article completely about definitions. Finally, we can always fall back onto practical reasons and explanations as to why our solution would work or why people should value what we have just said on an intellectual level. Cicero wrote, "Reason is the mistress and queen of all things." But he also wrote, "Men decide far more problems by hate, love, lust, rage, sorrow, hope, fear, illusion, or some other inward emotion than by reality, authority, any legal standard, judicial precedent, or statute." This brings us to pathos, the emotional appeals that get to the heart and the gut. We bring in more subjective reports. Perhaps we'll have testimony from people who have been affected by a problem. Authors can share their own experiences and personal connections, thus combining ethos and pathos. I should also mention that some things like dramatic statistics can make both logical and emotional appeals. Pathos can ask the readers to think about their own values, perhaps even tapping into things like spirituality or affinity groups and identity. These are the things that people are going to feel most strongly about. So you can be appealing to their sense of identity and their sense of self-interest. Finally, we can ramp up the pathos for all of these appeals by using powerful word choice, figurative language. Think about how a musical score lets you know how you should feel during a film. That's what the nuances of craft can do for you at this stage with pathos. Finally, visual rhetoric can make powerful emotional appeals. We've all seen dramatic pleas to save the animals with pictures of puppies in cages and maudlin music, or video of happy playing children to show the benefits of a cough syrup to anxious parents. Most successful writing combines ethos, logos, and pathos in varying measures depending on the rhetorical situation. Your academic writing will usually foreground logos, though you are also establishing your ethos as a good student. An editorial might start by listing logical reasons to support a policy, but end with an arousing emotional plea to do the right thing. If you ever need help deciding which appeals to use or how to articulate them, you can schedule an appointment in the University Writing Center. Our consultants are happy to help you at any stage of the writing process.